Alright, so we're going to start sketching our Lego here. We want to start out with the square base. And remember, these are based on your caliper measurements that you took of your little 2x2 Lego. And this height is extruded up. And remember that you're measuring the height of the block portion, not the part that includes the pegs too. So if we look here at our blueprint measuring, we want to make sure that we're not including the peg. We want to go from there to there on our Lego with the calipers. Okay, and then at this point you kind of have to make a choice. Do you want to draw the top first with the pegs, or do you want to draw the bottom with the hollowed out portion and the little cylinder in the middle? It's also a good idea to think about kind of matching the real world with your little roller cube up there in the top right. So I had the top selected there, so now I'm going to tip it down. I'm going to draw the bottom first here. And remember, there's a couple different ways to draw things no matter what you do. But this tool that I'm going to show you can kind of help you skip a couple steps. So you could draw a little square in there and kind of set your dimensions and get it set from the edges based on the thickness. But there is a tool here called a center point rectangle. Okay, and this is really helpful when you're drawing things that are based off of a centered point. So for a Lego, this inner piece that is kind of taken away, that hollow portion, is going to be based off the center, and so are the cylinders that we're going to draw to kind of support the Lego. Okay, so now what I'm doing here, I'm just mousing over the kind of middle of the line there on top and bottom, and then side to side. And what it does is it tells me where the midpoint is with those blue dotted lines, so I don't actually have to work on finding it with a dimension. You can easily set the dimension to half what your width is and half what your height is to get a center point too. Okay, so what I did here is I just drew this in, so now I know that that's centered, and then all I have to do is one of two things. I can set the thickness here all the way around, or I can measure the internal dimension of this recession with my calipers, using the back and then typing that value in, and then doing the same thing the other way so that it's a square. Okay, so here just setting the edge thickness all the same all the way around. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my cylinder in the middle, and to make a cylinder in 3 dimensions you have to have 2 circles. So you need to have an inner and an outer dimension of that circle that's in the bottom of the Lego. So when you go to measure the internal portion of that, make sure you're using the back of the calipers, and the external one here, this outside one, you can use the calipers regularly to get that dimension. Okay, and this way when you extrude, you have a tube, you have that cylinder. With a single circle, it won't work. There's nothing for it to extrude. All right, so now I have that sketched on there, and I can use it as my cutout tool. So instead of extruding here, we're going to do a remove. All right, so this is just a negative extrude. It's called a cut. We're just going to take away that volume of the inside of what we just drew. And when we go to 3D print these, we want to make sure we have a little bit of space right there so that there's enough plastic to print. We don't want to make it too thin. You can base it off of the measurement using the depth tool on the calipers, but you can look at it from the side there as it cuts away and kind of get an idea too. Really, it only has to go as deep as the pegs are tall, and everything extra on top of that, you're just saving plastic. Okay, so now I'm going to sketch the pegs, and there's a couple different ways you could do this too. The easiest way is going to be just to kind of draw the 4 pegs and then set their dimensions. If you have to do a larger Lego that maybe has 20 or 30 pegs on it, this would take a long time, but with 4 it's not too bad. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting my diameter, so I measured this with the calipers. So this way I know all my circles are the same size. Okay, and then what we have to do here is a little bit of math. So when you measure with the calipers, you can only get an accurate measurement from one edge of the circle to the edge of the cube itself. So I'd be measuring from about here all the way over to there. But when we draw these circles, it's a center measured circle. So it measures from the center of the circle. So what we want to do is take that whole dimension from the edge of the circle to the edge of the block, and then we're going to subtract half of our diameter, okay, which is the 0.192 in this case. And then if I hit enter, it does this math for me. Okay, you could do this on paper, you could do the subtraction, that's fine. But the tool here allows us to do it just kind of like you would in a Google Sheet where you're doing an equation. Okay, so just to show you this again, what I'm doing here is I'm going to take my total measurement of distance there, which is this edge to that edge of the peg on your Lego. Okay, and then I'm subtracting half of the diameter of that circle, so 0.5, which is half times 0.192. And I have to put that in parentheses because it's its own little problem, own little math problem. And then when I hit enter, I get 0.157. So then I know that value. I don't have to do that math equation every time for the rest of these. So I'm just going to use that value of 0.157. And I'm just going to go around and do this to all of my circles. So the other option here, to draw lots of the same item that are going to be spaced equally, we can use this rectangular pattern, or if it's a circular pattern, you can use the circular pattern tool. Okay, but how this works, and I'll just show you how it works. I'm not going to do it on our actual drawing, but take this circle, right? I only need one to draw in this case. Okay, and then when I use that tool, I click on my object, and then over here I have the ability to change how many I need. So for this one I need a 2 by 2. I can set the dimensions, right? And then what happens is I can pull on this little arrow to drag out my dimensions, and it makes a copy. Okay, and you can see how you could measure the distance between these and then set these basically in the same place as how we drew them the other way. All right, so now that we're done with this sketch, we can extrude our peg height. So I'm just going to click on all four of these at the same time because they're all the same. And then I'm going to measure that distance from the peg to the top of the Lego. And I'll put in that value, and now I have my peg. So then from here, once you have your Lego drawn, what we want to do is test fit this. So the goal here is to get this printed Lego to fit to an actual Lego. That shows me that you have the skill set to measure with the calipers and also to draw in CAD. Okay, so I'm just going to do my save as mesh like we have in the past. Okay, and want to make sure that we're saving it to our computer in the downloads folder. Okay, and then what we'll do is we'll open up PrusaSlicer and we'll insert our Lego. Sometimes they import on the wrong side. And what you can do is use the place on face tool. So you click on the object, click place on face, and then you click on the bottom. And for Legos, because they don't have a lot of contact to the print plate, you want to make sure that you add a brim to this. Okay, so we're going to check this little brim box, and then when you hit slice, you'll see what that shows. It's kind of like the brim on a hat, and it just gives a little bit of extra plastic to hold on to the Lego. All right, so the reason why we do this, you can see there's just 2 thin layers of plastic there to kind of hold this to the build plate, and that's sometimes not enough with temperature changes and maybe some fingerprints. So the brim is there to kind of help hold the Lego on a little bit better. And then what you're going to do, because we want to make a set of these and kind of put them in a display packaging, we're going to make a copy of 12 of these and use the arrange tool, which is up there in the top toolbar, to get them nice straight lines. And then when you export this with the brims, it's going to look like this when you print it.